Welcome to the second season of Teaching Peace. This podcast is the result of a collaboration between New York City Council of Mennonite Churches, Groundswell, and Brooklyn Peace Center. As we begin this inaugural episode of Season 2, we begin by acknowledging the land upon which these organizations sit in New York. We recognize that we are located in Lenape-Hoking, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Lenape people. We acknowledge the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement is part of our ongoing work to dismantle the legacies of settler colonialism and white supremacy. On Teaching Peace, we engage in conversation with clergy and clinicians, artists and activists, community leaders and practitioners to explore various pedagogies of peace building from across disciplines and socioeconomic and geographic contexts. In this season, we are in conversation with leaders of peace centers from around the world, including Los Angeles, Belfast, Quito, and Cape Town. My name is Jason Storbakken. I serve as pastor at Manhattan Mennonite Fellowship and as co-director of Brooklyn Peace Center. Brooklyn Peace Center officially launched last month on Juneteenth and aims to serve as a catalyst for peace building in Brooklyn and beyond. And my co-host is the Reverend Addie Banks.
Hi, I'm Addie Banks, and I'm glad to be here. Grateful for this opportunity to be here with you, Sue, and my co-host Jason again. And I'm the executive director and co-founder of the Groundswell Group, which was established 20 years ago now to strengthen the Anabaptist peace witness in New York City. And we have produced several babies out of Groundswell. So I'm grateful to be here today and just have this time to share with Sue. Who is on the West Coast, East meets West. Isn't this amazing? So, Sue, in this season of Teaching Peace, we're going to begin with what we usually do. We usually begin with this question, considering the context of our various lives and our work, and in particular, this particular season that we're in. We're in the season of COVID. We've been in a very chaotic political season. How do you define peace, Sue?
Ooh, yeah, let's just start light, right?
Let's start really light.
Welcome question, and yet such an important question. So thank you. First of all, thank you, Jason and Addie, for this invitation. I just feel really honored to be invited to this space. And, you know, as I'm thinking about peace, and how I understand it, it reminds me of a conversation that my husband had on his trip to North Korea. It was, I believe it was his third or fourth trip. And he asked them the same question. Kind of, you know, we had talked to John Paul Lederach before we went on that trip and had asked, you know, what are some questions that we should ask? And so we asked them, what are symbols of peace that you identify with? And it took them a long time to really think about it. And after about an hour or so, one of the officers who were with the group said, I'm sorry it's taken so long, but I think I would look at peace as the blue sky. And we said, why is that? And they said, because there are no mushroom clouds. And it gave us insight to how their understanding of peace is always related to war. How this mushroom cloud that they're talking about is the atomic bomb, or things related to things that have been dropped 70 years ago, and the stories that have been told all through this time. And as you guys know, they continue to build, right, nuclear weapons. And so it was so insightful for us to understand that their understanding of peace was the absence of war. For me, I think as a Christian, I think about the word shalom, which both of you know very well. And it's this two-sided coin of this peace and justice, right? And that's how I understand shalom, that the justice part is what it ought to be, and the peace is in right relationship. And so the peace is how it ought to be in our relationship with God, right? In my relationship to myself, how it ought to be, because it isn't where it ought to be, especially during this time of COVID. How my relationship ought to be with others and with creation. And there's so many brokenness in that work of justice that propels us to continue to seek peace. Another biblical image that I think about is this invitation in Zechariah, right? Where you invite a friend to sit under the fig tree and the vine, right? Again, this relationship to the land, this fruit, this vine, this invitation to sit together in right relationship with one another. And you can't do that unless you're right with yourself, right? You can't invite others to your space unless you have that kind of that capacity of hospitality. And so those are some of the words and images that help me to understand and pursue peace.
Thank you, Sue.
A follow-up question. How do you understand enemy?
Ooh, this might get me in trouble a little bit, but I think enemies are those who build walls, those who build walls of hostility that Jesus has broken down for us, right? Those rulers, authorities, and principalities that continue to divide and bind us instead of freeing us, like what Jesus has taught us in Luke 4, right? To proclaim the news, right? To proclaim the news to the poor, to release the captives, to set the blind, to help them to see and to liberate us all, right? Like that's the work of release. And yet I think enemies are those who continue to bind us, and enemies are authorities and systems and principalities that continue to say those walls need to be there, that for us to feel safe, that we need to sustain these walls. And if we believe that we are people of new creation, that we really want to live into that, then I refuse to believe that. But our systems also continue to bind us and say, that's too idealistic, that's you're being stupid, you're being foolish, they'll kind of continue to bind us into that. And I think that's how I understand enemy. And that was also, and this whole process of understanding enemy has been a journey for me, because a friend of mine who just wrote a book about I think it's Melissa Floor-Bixler, she's releasing a book about how to make an enemy, I believe. And she had asked me a couple of years ago when I was driving with her in Philly, she said, do you consider North Koreans your enemy? And I just had a hard time, like, no, but, the people say, but we're not, and officially, but, and I just stumbled with my words. And I realized, oh my goodness. And so it made me think about who is telling me these are my enemies. Who has told me, like, to understand, I think enemy is to understand who is telling me that they're my enemies. Those are the ones that I need to be suspicious of, right? And so that's something that I've been kind of thinking about. Yeah, and so then I become more free to understand, okay, who is doing the liberative work that Jesus has called us, and not only called us, but has modeled, right? And who is keeping us from that? Who is defining enemies, and who wins when we keep those walls in place, right? And so, no, they are not my enemies. They are my brothers and sisters. They're my long lost brothers and sisters that I need to reconnect with to be in right relationship as it ought to be.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
Not easy work, not easy. Hoy.
No.
Reframing who they are and whose frame are we looking through. Yes, thank you.
Exactly.
I wrote that down. Thank you.
You said it better in one sentence, something I tried to explain in more than a few sentences.
So Sue, can you tell us a little bit about your work as Denominational Minister of Transformative Peacemaking at Mennonite Church USA. It's a inspiring title. My goodness.
Yeah, it is. It is a very idealistic, I think, that we want to transform and make peace. But that is the vision that we have for the church, right? Especially as Mennonites and as Anabaptists, this really should be the core of our work. It's one of the core of our work, and we need to. I understand the gospel as not only right, me and God, but as I have shared about Shalom, that we are in right relationship and that we see that Jesus has the power to transform not only our individual lives, but everything, right? I came into this position when Trump was, was the president, was in office. And so
we remember.
It's never been a dull moment, never a dull moment in my job as overseeing the peace and justice work of Mennonite Church USA. I felt like a imposter for many, many years. Just not, it's so vast. This work is so vast.
Yeah.
But I think the gift of this work has been to meet other peacemakers who are doing this deep work on the ground, or some people do it across, nationally and internationally. And to meet these people who've been doing this so faithfully with this long, trajectory, right? Peace work takes a long time. We might not see it within our lifetime, right? And we continue to faithfully walk that path. And I just feel incredibly honored to be part of the Mennonite Church and to be part of this work, right? But yeah, how do we, we've talked about immigration because that was something that was deeply impacted by the former administration. How do we talk about war? How do we talk about immigration? How do we understand nationalism? How do we understand Christianity, right? How do we understand militarism? And so these are some of the things that we've tackled. And of course, racism and anti-racist resources. I know we've had them, but we've really taken a lot of time to revamp that and encourage and give resources to our conferences in Mennonite Church USA to do the work of how does that look like on the board level? How does that look like at a conference level? How does that look like in your churches? How can we audit so that we can look at how our systems still are not anti-racist, right? Like how do we do all that work? And just to be part of a little bit even in that has been really rewarding, but exhausting as well. And the latest thing, we've been doing also some curriculum.
Yeah, I'm interested about that, Sue, especially the abolition curriculum. I think that might be what you're pointing to. I've heard about this from so many folks outside of the Anabaptist world who've come up to me from mainline churches to even storefront Pentecostal churches in Brooklyn and saying, Jason, the work that the Mennonite Church USA is doing around abolition, about abolishing the police department, which is rooted in historic slavery and slave patrols, is such a bold and prophetic witness. I imagine it's quite controversial too, especially to hold all of this. Can you speak to a little bit of that tension?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're doing peace work, you will always have resistance, right? It is not keeping the status quo, right?
Yeah,
it is to continually to critique and to question and to challenge. And that's not fun when you actually benefit from those systems, right? Where the status quo works for you, right? And so we've heard various responses. One good thing about it is that and I think more the controversial part of it is that it was offered for free. It was and so it's very accessible. And so a lot of people have access to it. And so there's been a lot of excitement. Over 9,000, almost 400 people individuals have engaged with this curriculum. And we're able to do all the analytics. I said, Alex, is it just 9,300 hits, you know, but he goes, no, these are individual users. So if I go 10 times, that's still just considered one. And I was like blown away. I think there are people who are seeking this kind of faith engagement of and how it affects our lives now. We're trying to I think the church needs to center our work for the poor, for the most marginalized. Yes. That's what I understand in Luke 4, right? It should be good news to the poor and the weak and the marginalized, right? And so we need to speak into this. And again, I think there's controversy because it's defund the police with a question mark. We are asking churches to engage with the things that are important, the conversations that are happening now. Yes. We also want people to know that as Anabaptists, we should engage in this conversation. If we're talking about violence, right? If we're talking about militarization, if we're talking about, if we're interested in talking about anti-militarism overseas, how about militarization of our streets, right? And so it's not for us to say this is the way it must go, but it's for us to have that conversation. And we want we wanted to have something, especially after George Floyd murder, we need this. We've been needing it for a long time, but now there's some momentum, and let's provide some tools for our churches and congregations that want to engage it. We're not telling everybody they need to engage it. It's one of the many resources that MCUSA provides. You know, you don't have to engage with this curriculum if you don't think this is relevant to your congregation. But over 9,000 people think this is relevant, right? And so it is controversial, but I think there's a lot of people have been also voicing without even engaging in the curriculum. They just look at the fact that we did a curriculum and think that our denomination is leaning a certain way and all these things, but we really want to speak to the times, and especially to the people who are most impacted. So that was the reason behind that, that curriculum. It's not for a political purpose. It is really to help us to understand violence in our streets and in our neighborhoods and those who are most impacted, and to help people reimagine. I think that's the beautiful piece of abolition movement, whether you agree or not, that they're helping people to reimagine what safety could look like. What does reimagining community look like? What does reimagining what living together without punishment, what does that even look like? Isn't that what Mennonites, haven't we talked about those kinds of things? Those are kind of core values of Mennonites and Anabaptists. So I think it's worth exploring. And we've had people who've been doing that work in their communities write it. So it wasn't just a theoretical kind of a thing. These are very hands-on activities that are also suggested in the curriculum.
Right.
Sue, that is so wonderful. I so appreciate being able to have the resource to go to, because as you said, we had to create this kind of stuff for ourselves in the urban community because this was our experience, and we felt we were rooted in these Anabaptist values, but those issues weren't on the table clearly. So you have awakened us. You have said, stay woke, and it is amazing to see the impact of this curriculum, and it is out. It's out in the world, which is where it needs to be, not just in our congregations. But you have been working at this kind of thing for a long time, Sue. So I just want to commend you for bringing this forward, because it's so timely and it's so contextual. It's the stuff that we read about every day that we exist to be a part of, and we haven't had the tools. So thank you. Yeah, so Sue, the peace movement for too long has simply been about ending war. And you've already alluded to some of this earlier. More recently, there's been a shift from nonviolence resistance toward the work of anti-violence. This is akin to Ibram X. Kendi's shift in language from not racist to anti-racist. Could you share a little bit about where else besides the abolition curriculum you see this shift happening now?
Yeah, I mean, again, another blessing of what I am doing is with the people that I work with. We have a very intercultural team. We have the first Black executive director who, that I don't have to fight against, like he's actually the one who's like, come on, where is that thing? Where is that work that we need to do now? And so this proactive stands in the way that we need to do our peace work, right? Not to just avoid talking about things, but to really engage what is being said on the street, right? What are the things that maybe, and by the people who are most impacted, and it's not just about keeping silent to make peace, but to understand that peace also takes time for us to just be out there and to make noise. Like that is also important, to dig into scripture even more. We need to be proactive, because I think our lack of engagement also comes from our lack of theology.
Yes.
Right.
And so it's not just being on the streets, but reading scripture. What does it really say? And how does that actually live out in our life now? And so I really want to challenge ourselves to not only be proactive in our action, but be proactive in scripture, and because if we can't connect that, the world does a better job of doing activism work. And I think a lot of Christians do too. But what we have is we can help our younger generation to know, like, actually this is God's work, and this is what the church should be doing. And that continues to give them connection to our faith that I think is keeps on, it's not quite there as much as I wish that we have. So we're doing a lot of like Bible engagement too, theological engagement, along with the other things that we're doing.
Well, Sue, thank you for disrupting this propaganda machine that is definitely an enemy of the gospel. So this is what you've been doing.
Well, I'm just learning on the job.
As we all are.
Yes.
So Sue, you and your husband, Hyun-Hur, are co-founders of a peace center in Los Angeles, of ReconciliAsian.
Yes.
And the mission is essentially to educate and promote the culture of peacemaking and reconciliation within the Korean community through the church. What does peacemaking look like among the Korean and Asian communities in Los Angeles? And what's the role of trauma healing among the immigrant communities you serve?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, this happens very organically. We as we have become Anabaptists, and my husband has been Anabaptist since 1980 something, 81, 82. And he's introduced me to that tradition. And we saw how our immigrant churches in Los Angeles have quite a bit of conflict within the church. And we thought, dang, we're supposed to be like the ones to promote, the gospel and invite people to this place. But people are like, I'm not going to your church. They're like always fighting. Right? And so we thought, what is happening? Like, why? And it wasn't just my church. It wasn't just his church. It wasn't their church. It was like all my friends have gone through some sort of, church split and conflict that had traumatized them. And so we said, what is going on? And what are some things? And so that's when we saw like the Anabaptists and the tools and skills that Mennonites have that we don't always practice, but we got the conflict transformation resources. Yeah. We spearhead restorative justice, right? Like we do trauma and healing work, but it doesn't always get funneled and actualized. And so we said, what would that look like? What are some resources that we could bring into our churches? And that's how we started the Peace Center, right? We said, what does the Bible say? And so my husband does a lot of the theology part in Korean to these churches, because you have to convince people that peace is not a liberal or a, hiji-biji kind of like thought that's new. It's actually anchored. And I think Mennonites have over 500 years of Anabaptist theology that roots us, right? And so let's talk about that. And what does peacemaking look like in our families? What does that look like in our churches? What does that look in our communities? Can people who can't even speak English be peacemakers in their communities? Heck yeah. Grandmothers, they can be peacemakers, right?
Absolutely.
And what does that look like in the country back home where we might have our roots? Because we're Korean, so every time we say, yeah, we're going to start this, or we're part of a peace center, people are like, oh, so what do you think about North Korea? And we were like, well, and then we all of a sudden became North Korean experts, which we weren't, but God has been so faithful in the last, this is our 9th year. Every year we've been engaged with something related to North Korea, and that has really expanded our understanding of peacemaking as well, and has also given us privilege. I mean, the last 3 years, because of the US ban, so that we cannot go into North Korea, even before the pandemic, they had restricted Americans from entering into North Korea. And so we couldn't go since then, but yeah, we've been doing this work. And we just thought, this is too idealistic, all of these different levels of peacemaking, but you know what? If we dream big, God answers. It's crazy, right? Like your peace center, like it's incredible. Yeah. And we have to dream like crazy big, because then when it happens, it wasn't your plan.
Yes.
It was really God who has given you that inspiration, and we could see that we were able to tackle North Korea, hello, and also engage in the multifaceted levels of peace that we wanted to engage. And I think, we've tried conflict transformation, restorative justice. These are all important things, but what really has spoken to our immigrant churches is the trauma piece.
Yeah.
Because immigration is trauma.
Yeah.
And to be uprooted from your country and to be transplanted to a totally different place, there's shock. But because it's like, well, other people have done it, it's no big deal. No, it's embodied, and you don't, and we have a history in our country of war, an unresolved war, a war that began in 1950 that was never official, that has never officially ended. This is the 71 year of unresolved, the longest running separation created by man in modern history. We had signed an armistice, but never a full peace treaty. And so we have that trauma of division that we carry in our bodies. Yeah. And then you come to America, like you don't leave your trauma by the border, you bring that in, and then you have other trauma that you also experience here, trauma of racism, trauma of erasure, trauma of lack of language, disorientation, and objectification of women, right? And demasculation of men. Right. All of these things are all happening at the same time. You could have a PhD or but if you don't speak the language here, you're considered subhuman, right? They make fun of you. I don't understand your accent, right. And all these dehumanizing experiences really take a toll on people. And so we've been doing a lot of trauma and resilience work that has really helped people to understand not only like personal healing, but the need for structural healing and the process of healing, not just you have to forgive and everything is okay, but there is this historical trauma, there's this collective trauma of anti-Asian hate that we experienced during the pandemic, right? That's not a new thing. It's something that has happened since the late 1800s. right? Like helping people to connect that so that they can make sense of their world. That's another work that we've been doing that has been truly rich.
Wow. Well, Sue, this I love this term that you used about collective trauma. Mm-hmm. And in this era, collective trauma even goes across our ethnicities. There's a combined collective trauma. The 2020 incidents in primarily New York and Los Angeles around Asian hate crimes, but those are things that other communities have always been experiencing. So this kind of puts us all together now. So what can you say that ReconciliAsian is doing to address this that other groups might also learn from or incorporate in? Because you're really leading the way into something that most of us on the margins have need of.
Yeah, and I recently read, I think earlier today, that last year it was 150% increase in anti-Asian hate crimes, and it was almost exclusively in Los Angeles and New York City, which is what
we're San Francisco. Yep.
And San Francisco. Yep. So there's a lot of folks in the middle who don't understand what's going on, and they're so disconnected.
Yeah. Again, like I was saying, you know, this is anti-Asian perception and anti-Asian racism is something that we have had since the beginning. You'll see in 1870s, this anti-Asian, especially particularly Chinese, who've come for the who come to work at the railroad. Again, connected to capitalism, connected to laborers, how we treat, people from Central and South America, like Central America, how we treat them as, that's how Asians were also treated, right? And so there's been in the late 1800s, there was lynching of Chinese people, 19 Chinese people by 500 mobsters, and that happened in Los Angeles. In 1882, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act that specifically, that was the first law that barred, that excluded people based on their race and ethnicity. So there's the yellow peril is what they called it. Like it's the yellow problem, right? That is something that a lot of us don't even know about because we're not taught this history, right? And so there's that piece. And then we come to, I'm skipping so many different things. And then 1960s, when immigration laws, because of the civil rights movement, has opened up doors for Asian Americans to be allowed into America. There's a whole set of, and there's lack of understanding for Asian Americans to recognize that it was on the struggle by African Americans and their work that we were able to enter into America in the 1960s. Again, lack of history, lack of connection. And so Addie, like you were saying, it's this connection that we need to have. We need to recognize that our struggles are related. And yet again, this power of division, walls of hostility that have been used over and over in white supremacy, right? We have been, especially the Asian and Black communities, have been pitted against, right? Where I'm from in LA, 1965, the Watts riots. It was police brutality that erupted the city. 1992, the LA uprising with the Rodney King case, right? Police brutality of 4 white cops, right? Not indicted. And how did they frame that? It was a Black and Asian issue and the eruption again of the city. And then we see that again happening right now. And so we need to recognize these patterns. We need to see that we have been pitted against many times over. Even now, when we see a lot of the footage of Asian elderly being pushed, what they show is there's a lot of Black people who are pushing Asian elderly. But in fact, if you look at the whole Asian hate incident, that's not the predominant tension. But what gets aired are those dramatic tensions, right? And so what will happen is, how does that affect us? Is that Black communities will be like, you know, you guys are just getting into this. Like, you guys, we have experienced this, but you have not. And, you know, we don't want to have anything to do with this. And Asians are like, hey, we try to show up for, you know, Black Lives Matter, and you're not showing up for us. And again, creating more divisions and more walls. And we have to refuse to go into that and to enter into that call of peace, where we proclaim peace, and we continue to say, no, that's not where we're supposed to go. And to seek that kind of solidarity work and to show up for each other. This new wave of anti-Asian racism, where especially for me, I was most impacted in March 16th this year, when in Atlanta, there was a shooting at the spa. The Atlanta spa massacre, there were 8 people killed, 6 were Asian women, 4 were Korean Americans. And they were poor working Korean Americans. And it really galvanized our community. And it's, you know, we felt so silenced in so many ways, and we were so afraid for our elders who've been harmed. There have been over 6,600 incidents of anti-Asian hate crime since March of last year to March of this year. 6,600 reported. So imagine, and we had to create that because our police system said, well, that's not really a hate crime. And their definition didn't, so they're like, we can't really do anything about it. And so a lot of Asian American activists and scholars put this Stop Anti-Asian Hate website together where people couldn't do this. So it has activated Asian Americans in new ways. There's always been a movement, but it has activated and has given us a voice and a point. Why is it that it's always so painful, right? It's like, why does George Floyd have to die in that way that we become activated? Why do we have to have martyrs? But the martyrs are there, and we feel like our collective voice needs to be shared. And so ReconciliAsian, what we've been doing is we've been writing our own stories. We have a cohort of women who are writing their stories. We have artists who gather and they're creating art. They created a zine last year after George Floyd's murder, and wanted to make sure that people knew that Asians want to be in solidarity with struggles of the Black community. We also have a Asian Anabaptist cohort, because we have nowhere to go for youth. They don't feel comfortable in Mennonite churches because it's predominantly white. And they don't feel comfortable when they go to Asian churches because their theology it's not what they were taught. And so we have cohorts for them to speak about their experience, to talk about their experience, and also find friendship. So those are some of the things that we've been doing with, and also hosting talks with Black and Asian leaders about what we need to do together, because there's so much work to be done, and our organization is too small to engage everything. And so we said, where do we find our energy? Where is God calling us to spend our energy? It's to communicate with our Black brothers and sisters, and to also encourage our younger Asian Americans to do the work, because we're tired too. There's too much to be done, and we need to share it.
We definitely see the partnerships that we need to be doing with East and West, and people that this open space has been created to do that. So we'll want to talk more about that offline, because this is definitely a next step for us.
Absolutely, I would love that.
Sue, in a previous conversation, I remember you sharing about 2 Korean terms. I think it was Han, collective suffering, and R, resilience, is providing a vehicle or maybe a paradigm for peacemaking within the Korean context, Korean American cultures. Can you tell us more about these 2 ideas of Han and R?
Yeah, so we've been trying to contextualize, like you, I've been trained through the STAR program, Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience. through CJP, Center for Justice and Peacebuilding.
So many acronyms.
Eastern Mennonite University. Yes, I want to make sure that we get them right.
The STAR program.
The STAR program.
Yeah, the STAR program.
So
EMU-CPJ.
If you're not Mennonite, it's hard to understand all of that. So I was trying to spell it out. So, you know, one of the work is how do we contextualize this, you know, work of trauma and resilience. And my friend and I, she's a therapist, and as a pastor, we were like, how do we contextualize this in the Korean communities? And the concept of Han, H-A-N, I think, is a psychological term, actually, talking about the collective suffering that is done to people who have been oppressed, right? It's this feeling of that's felt in the gut. Like, I love that, like, it is embodied. Yeah. It is this long suffering, a collective long suffering that is felt, that you carry. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's Han. That's trauma. And but for Koreans, the word Han is like, you know, it's the longing for wholeness and reunification. That's our Han. You know, we want our parents or grandparents to be able to go see their homeland and go walk the streets that they walked on, right? Like, it's not that far. It's only like 3-4 hours away, and they couldn't for the last 71 years, right? Like, something is wrong. And they carry this harm. And especially our marginalized communities of color in our country in the US understand this harm. And it just expands our language to understand it. And Koreans do have this. It was actually a concept that was kind of propagated by the Japanese colonialists to say, you guys are weak. You guys have too much Han. You guys have too much, like, you guys are weaker than us. You know, like, you guys have the problem. You guys have too much Han. And Koreans have now, the Korean later have, you know, twisted that. And they said, yeah, we have Han. And there's this creativity that comes out. And that's the art.
Yes, wow.
The art is this, the singing. Jason, you said you know the song Ariran. This is a traditional Korean song of a woman, usually sung by a woman, about a lover who has left and she is sad. And singing that song is art. To express it, right? To release it. It's kind of like our spirituals, right? How you sing the pain, but because they could sing it, they have that spirit of resilience, that spirit of singing it together, to dance together. And so it is that when Koreans can't sing that song without crying, because it is a song that and a lot of our more shamanistic rituals still have that release. It's a sense of release. But in the Christian circle, I think in certain ways, I see a lot of charismatic movement as a positive thing, because it allows people to release their Han, right? It allows space for people to yell out, to cry to God, to sing, to move, to sway. And like, that's the part of the art of this dance, of this release, letting go and allowing people to let go. That's the art. So it's not exactly the same, but it expands our understanding. It contextualizes these concepts of trauma and resilience in ways that's already embedded in our culture.
Oh, that is really awesome to see that kind of, instead of just all these head processes and informational processes, the way that we're being released through body. So, okay, Han. Yes. So this ties into the next question. You're a qualified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory and Assessment Tool that helps individuals and groups build cultural competency. I like to say cultural responsiveness. And you're also a STAR facilitator. Can you just share how these two modalities have contributed to your work in peace building. And I think you've already been saying that. You just gave us a wonderful example just now. But can you say a little more about how those two are being used, and if there are some other tools, which I think is, you just gave us one, and other tools that we can be using that you might recommend?
Well, I think for some, we're realizing that some churches have a hard time talking about racism. Because that implies that you're a racist, right? And that all of the ways that you've lived is wrong. And so it's hard for them to see the systemic issues. When we say, most of the time, like Jason, when we say white people, we're not talking about you, we're talking about the white system, right? That benefits white people, right? That has been built to benefit a certain group, right? And so we're like, okay, if they can't see that, we're just talking, like, we're not even saying the same thing. We're just kind of passing each other. And so intercultural competency work helps people to recognize, like, we have different cultures, right? Let's start with like the Mennonites, right? We are all Mennonites here, but we look different, right? But we also can agree that there is specific culture within the Mennonite that we can also, like, can we see that, right? And that cultures are not bad. There's not one that's bad and one that's good. So we're trying to help people who can't quite see the structural things. The intercultural competency capacity gives people tools to be able to look at how their lives, what they've grown up, their experiences and their exposure limits them. And that's okay, right? Like, I grew up, my parents were, they had a supermarket near MacArthur Park. It's it was kind of scary in the 80s, but, and there was a lot of drug dealing in that area, and there were no Asians. And I was like a teenager walking down the street, and people are like whistling at you, saying things that I don't understand, right? And yet, like, that store gave me capacity to go, okay, there's a homeless man who's really, really smelly kind of coming through. Okay, how am I going to deal with him as a customer? Okay, there is there's a family. They're the Garcias, like, they're coming in, and look how much the kids have grown, right? And my dad will give them an extra candy because they graduated from high school. He'll give them another thing, right? Like, just that exposure. I just sometimes hated going there, but I realized, oh my gosh, those were such gifts. Right? To be exposed to that and the experience. But if you didn't grow up with all of those things, that's okay too. Just recognize that you're limited by that. And also helping people who are also bicultural, they're not always intercultural. You know? And so there are a lot of people who grew up in a white monocultural, and then they're very cross-cultural. Right? Because they know that their lack of experience and exposure limits them. So they've learned. And it's something that you could actually learn. Intercultural competency is something that you can build. And so that's what excites me about this tool, so that people can see how their life is intertwined, that they have their own culture. And as they are seeing how different cultures work, and that they can go back and forth, that we see that we're different, and that we're the same, but we're different, that we're giving them capacity to have, so that they can see the systemic things. And so, yeah, those are some of the tools that we're actually using right now. I can tell you more, but I think
I have one last question, Sue, and then I'm going to turn it over to Addie. Just thank you for your wisdom, your leadership, your joy, and your presence. My last question is, where do you find joy that sustains you through this work?
Yeah, I came into the Mennonite Church, I guess, from the sideways, you know. I am from California, where a lot of us came into the Mennonite Church. We are not, we chose to become Mennonites, you know. And then when I became more active, I went to Hope for the Future. It's a gathering of people of color in our Mennonite church. And so these are the ways that I've come into the Mennonite church and seeing people from the side, like from the sideways. Yeah. And that got me excited about coming into this work with, you know, with people are like, yeah, these are my people. And also through Fuller, we had a lot of, you know, Anabaptist Mennonite professors there, and have built relationships with them. So we just kind of came thinking that that's what it was. Working as a denominational minister, I'm realizing that that is the sideway. These are not the majority of the people in the Mennonite church. But the joy is reconnecting with those people that I've always understood to be true Anabaptists, not just holding the cultural traditions. And I've also seen so many cultural Mennonites ethnic Mennonites who also have the legacy and do it so well, so beautifully, knowing the inheritance that they have and do the work, right? That go beyond just storing their history, right? But like sharing it, learning from others. I've seen that. But the real joy in this work is finding people from the sidelines who are kind of behind, who've been doing this work, who've also been questioning and yet have committed. You know, I often say, I'm not your adopted brother here, for a Korean adoptee here. I am your brother and I'm your sister. I am your sibling in this family. Don't treat me like an adopted person, you know? And that's where I'm going. And those people, they're like, heck yeah, Sue, you're a part of this family. And I'm like, yeah, I am, you know? And so like finding this courage with other courageous co-conspirators, that has been the joy. And that's why I get excited when I meet you, Jason, and I meet you, Addie. Like, you guys are our co-conspirators that are doing this work within the church, recognizing our frailties, recognizing their messiness and really like unhealthy things. But we continue to work together and we continue to dream big. And I think finding fellow sojourners on the way have given me much joy. It's the relationships that keep me going. It's not anything really else. And yeah, the theology, this people of this tradition keeps me doing the hard work. And it's been hard, but it's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue.
Sue, thank you so much. This has been a robust conversation, and it has been so lively. And I want to say it's been tinged with joy for me. Yes. So we like to finish on, keep that going up higher, a lighter note. So let's just do a lightning round that is either or, so that we can just learn a little bit more about you. Okay. So it's going to be fun questions. Okay. On time or early?
On time.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Hot or cold?
What?
Hot or cold?
Oh gosh, now hot.
Oh, that's summer winter.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm getting older.
Private summers. I got you. Private summers. Yes. Novel or movie?
Novel.
Mountains or beach?
Beach. Big
party or small gathering?
Oh, used to be big gatherings, but now small parties.
Sweet or salty?
Salty.
Singing or dancing?
Ooh, singing while dancing.
Thank you so much for joining us on Teaching Peace, and we look forward to our work together. And I'm going to turn it over to my brother Jason for a closeout. This has been so amazing. I feel like I've had like a little banquet table spread before me, and I'm wondering what I'm going to choose first. But we'll be back in touch. Thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful. Thank you for being our inaugural guest on the second season of Teaching Peace. It really helped us kick it off with a bang. And thank you for everyone who tunes in to listen to Teaching Peace. All episodes of Teaching Peace can be found on the Brooklyn Peace Center's YouTube channel and all major podcast platforms. So please remember to like and subscribe. And thank you for investing in the work of peace and building peace together through Teaching Peace. Go in peace, my friends.
Grace and